We're here. Another new setup, so give me 1 second while I wait for everything to get online and do what it says it's supposed to be doing. That says it's all online. It says it's doing its thing. Okay, so everything says it's online, so we're just gonna get started and see what happens. So, if you're here, say hi. I would love to hang out and chit chat. I am super duper pumped today because I cut out the lining for the blazer that I'm making. I am making a femme power suit like this. It's gonna have a blazer with a high waist, wide leg pant in matching colors, like a monotone magenta. It's gonna be amazing. So that's what I got done yesterday. What are you working on? What is new in your life? What was one fun thing you did yesterday or today? Still pretty early in the day, so whatever you've been up to, let me know. I'd love to hear what you're up to. Um, Maybe I skipped a little bit. Hi, my name's Abby, and I am the founder of DIY Fashion Rebel. And if you've dreamed of sewing clothes just like this, or something maybe that looks completely different, but still sewing your own clothes, then you're in the right place because I help people learn how to sew clothing from home. And I especially focus on absolute beginners. So if you've been thinking about this, you've been wanting to do it, but you're like, how do I get started? Yes, that's like the number one question that everybody has. So you are not alone if you have felt that way, but you are in the right place hanging out if that's on your mind, if that's a goal that you have, because I help people just like you start creating clothing like this. I'll get my hands right. So, um, helping beginners means that I hear a lot of questions, and like I just said earlier, the number one question is, how do I get started? Because when you start sewing, you probably already know there's so much to learn. There's fabric and the machine and stitches and the pattern and terminology and thread and blah, 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 blah. That's overwhelming and confusing. It was for me, it is for most people. So if you feel overwhelmed and confused right now, that's really normal. Even though it shouldn't be, it's very normal, so you are not alone, okay? um, that being said, I am trying to make a step-by-step guide to help people go from never having touched a sewing machine to using patterns and creating things like this. And it all starts with my first guide that I'm beta testing. I already know that it works, but I want to help more people work through it and just work out any kinks there might be. That guide is let's see, there, the 5 steps to start sewing with confidence. This guide walks you through taking your machine out of the box all the way to sewing your first stitches and making them look really, really good. And this makes it easy because instead of trying to pick a fabric, pick a pattern, understand the terminology, pick the thread, all of these things at once when you start your first project, no. We are going to learn how to use our machine without actually sewing a project. And it's totally possible. I show you how in these 5 steps, and it takes like 3 hours really to sit down and get comfortable using your machine. So if that sounds like something you're interested in, if you think that would help you, check the description. There'll be a link where you can grab this for free. Okay, 100%. I want everyone to start using their machine. Confidence. Let's not leave it in the box any longer, shall we? So if you'd like to grab this, grab it for free in the description, okay? Now, on to today's live, which is part of a series where I'm talking through the major problems people have with their sewing machines that I do cover inside of these 5 steps. Because I think the sewing machine feels very overwhelming for a lot of people. It's a new piece of equipment, you're not quite sure how to use it, you don't want to break it. Makes sense, it all makes sense. But if you don't get started, if you don't try using it, you're not gonna get anywhere. So let's just take this step by step. Use this. It will walk you through everything. But in this video, I want to talk about tension. Now, if you're brand new, you probably haven't heard this word. If you started sewing and your stitches look kind of weird, like your stitches are super loose and loopy, or your stitches are really small and tight and they're like making your fabric bunch up, you've probably heard people tell you that your tension is off or your tension's not set right. And you're like, if you're like me, I was like, okay, tension, like, what is that? What do I do? Because just to say that isn't necessarily very helpful. So I'm going to explain the basics of tension in this video so you have a little better understanding of like what the heck is going on. So tension is like just the definition of, you know, like if we were going to play tug of war and I was pulling on one side and you were pulling on the other, we would have tension in the middle of us both pulling outward, right? Okay, that's a version of tension. It's useful for explaining the sewing machine. So when you sew, you have two threads, okay? You have a top thread and you have a bottom thread, okay? And the top thread is typically on a spool. Just drawing it so you can kind of see it better. Okay, so we have a spool, nifty. And on the bottom we have what's called a bobbin. And if you don't know what these things are, do not worry. They're all covered inside of my 5 steps. Okay? So, on the top, you have a spool. On the bottom, you have a bobbin, okay? And this is thread on here, okay? Now, these two threads, one comes down from the top and one comes up from the bottom, and they play tug of war with each other. So if this is your fabric, okay, I'll write it in case anyone comes in later and they're like, what is that? Okay, so here is your fabric. And so the top thread goes like this. Okay, and you know your needle moves up and down. So your needle goes down at this point and then it comes up and moves forward and goes down and so on and so forth, okay? So this is your top thread. The bottom thread does the exact same thing, okay? So we're just gonna go bottom thread, so on. Now the trick here is at these points where the stitches are, these two threads are pulling on each other. And they need to pull with an even amount of force, okay? So they need to be about equal in size, okay? When you start having problems is if one of your threads is pulling much more and one of your threads is pulling much less, okay? When the tug of war isn't even, your stitches start looking very weird. If your bottom thread is like this, like it's very little compared to the top, you can get really big loopy threads on the bottom because you're not pulling tightly enough, okay? So yeah, that's the basics of tension, that you're playing this tug of war situation. Now, what affects your tension? How do you fix this if one thread is much stronger than the other one? And the answer to that is lots of things. On the top, the tension is primarily set by threading your machine correctly, okay? that, if you need help with that, I cover that inside the 5 steps. So grab the link, use the 5 steps, thread your machine correctly. The second thing is the tension dial. There's literally just a little dial on the top of your machine that has numbers 1 through 5, and you can just turn that to help adjust tension. Okay, so those are the 2 main ways that you can adjust tension on the top, is by threading it correctly, very important, and by using this tension dial wherever I've drawn it. The bobbin thread is not adjustable if you have a top load bobbin. Just make sure that you thread it correctly. That is really the biggest issue that I see beginners have, is they don't thread their machines correctly because it's new and you're probably going to do it wrong a couple of times. I still do it wrong sometimes, but it's so important that you actually thread your machine correctly, because that plays a major role in keeping your tension and your stitches looking good. Okay, so again, I explained how to do all of this step by step, how to thread your machine the right way, easily, in the 5 steps. So does this help make tension make a little bit more sense? Because I feel like I was confused by tension for forever, and I don't think it's, once I figured it out, I didn't think it was that hard. It's just tug of war. So if your tension is off, you just need to adjust the top and bottom until you get this nice and even. That's the thing, that's what we're doing. So, if this video helped you, let me know if it what helped you about it. If you have questions, I know that this is not a full tutorial on how to fix everything. That would take more time, and I'm trying to give you the basics here just to kind of get you in the right mindset, but it's hard to teach like full concepts on here just because I'm yeah, it's just trickier. It's easier when I have my machine out and I have more time. So that is an intro to tension. I hope that it helps you, and I will be going live again soon with more beginner tips and info. And if you want to see how the FEM power suit turns out, like this one, be sure to follow along on Instagram. That's where I tend to post most of the progress photos. And I will see you guys again later. All right. Bye, guys.